Thank you for joining us at the Evolution of Medicine Summit. A warm welcome. We wanted to make a specific thank you to our sponsors that have made this event possible. Energetics, an innovative natural remedy and supplement company, is committed to revitalizing medicine, and Cyrex Labs, a clinical immunology laboratory specializing in functional immunology and autoimmunity. Most of all, thank you for listening. If you'd like to share this with your colleagues and friends on Facebook if you enjoy the content, and if you have questions, you can ask us on Twitter with the hashtag EvoMed. Finally, if you really want to play your part in accelerating the evolution of medicine, ask your doctor if the Evolution of Medicine Summit might be right for them. Thank you and enjoy. All right, welcome back to the Evolution of Medicine Summit. This is James Maskell, and we're into our doctor portion of the summit, and I am literally falling off my seat with excitement at my next guest here today. It's Dr. Shilpa Saxena, all the way from Florida. Dr. Saxena and I met last year at Heal Thy Practice conference, where she was speaking, and I had an opportunity to spend some time with her and interview her, and I really feel like she's an innovator in medicine, and I must not be the only person that feels that, because she is faculty at the Institute of Functional Medicine, at the new George Washington program for integrative and metabolic medicine. She's on the faculty of the University of Miami and also guest faculty at the Arizona Center for Integrative Medicine. So I feel very fortunate to have you here on the Evolution of Medicine Summit. Thank you for being with us here, Dr. Shilpa Saxena.
Thank you so much, James. I'm really excited to be able to help all of our listeners really understand where medicine is going with your help.
Well, I appreciate that. So this is the Evolution of Medicine. We're going to talk the majority today about what you're doing in your practice with merging functional medicine with the group visit model. And I'm really excited about that because I really feel like it has the potential to change medicine and make this type of medicine available to the middle of a bell curve of America, which I think is something that we're all striving for. But before we get into the details of that, everyone sort of has their weird story about how they ended up doing functional integrated medicine, their passion that was driven for it. Where did that come from you, Shilpa?
I grew up in a traditional Asian Indian home, and so I was always surrounded by ideas and modalities that come from an ancient form of healing. So these things were around me, but of course in the Indian tradition, it's great to get an education. And as I learned the Western principles of science, I started to say, okay, these are also equally entertaining to understand and very mind-provoking, but there's something to be said about some of the things that my grandmother had taught me growing up. So that was kind of the background. But then it really started to hit me when I went through my own personal issues. I was a relatively young woman in my 20s, experiencing some conditions that I did not think I should be experiencing. And after having gone through the medical system myself, I realized there's gaps. We just tend to be reactive at times to the information that a patient gives. And, so for my instances, I had some significant allergies, asthma. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome and had insulin resistance, all of which I just was very surprised with. I was basically told that it was probably genetics, not much I can do about it besides take medications. It just seemed that there was a better way. That kind of created the suspicion that there should be something else out there. However, during my training, I kind of just plowed through the medical science, doing everything that everybody else does. And at some point, I started attracting patients who were taking, dietary supplements, botanicals, and finding that they were seeing great outcomes. This is when I started to explore. It was really just a bridging of my past experiences with traditional healing modalities and my interest in really clinical evidence-based modalities that came together through an interest of my own healing as well.
Yeah, it always seems to be the way with that, with your own healing as a starting point. And just to look out at all the different healing modalities that are out there, it seems like Western medicine is really the only one that doesn't think of self-healing or the body's self-healing capability doesn't take that seriously. Was it a desire to sort of understand that as well? Because I think that's just such a huge part in every other tradition of medicine.
Absolutely. There is something that we miss. What's interesting is that many integrative and functional medicine practitioners tend to see patients who work in the conventional medical field. Many of us realize there's a big gap when we don't take care of the whole person. I mean, to take care of the pieces or parts of their body and not understand them to be an integrated whole, and that they're kind of woven together through some sort of above principle, whether you call it a soul or a spirit or, the consciousness, we are not sure, but it's something that's present, and we all seek it in some way because we're really looking for more than just health of parts. We're looking for happiness of whole.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. So let's get into the nitty-gritty here. I mean, what was it that you've obviously built a really interesting group visit model in your practice, and now through different organizations like the ones we've already mentioned are starting to spread that out. What was it the genesis of starting to think in this direction about moving in a direction where you could see more than one person at a time, or otherwise? What started the whole thought process with it?
They say that necessity is the mother of invention, and it was absolutely the reason why I started looking for a different way to take care of my patients. You see, as I started understanding more and more about root cause medicine, meaning looking for the source of the issue as opposed to just diagnosing it, the more I realized that education will play a bigger role in the care of my patients. However, education requires me to connect with a person and give them, more than a 10 or 15 minute download of key facts. It's a connection, it's an understanding, it's a process in which you have to give an informed choice to the patient. Well, then there was a mathematical problem there. I needed more time with my patients for education. Now, as fate would have it, the person that I was working with became pregnant and was going to be gone for 3 months on maternity leave. And so I was going to be taking care of double the amount of patients and still continuing to be able to offer the education piece. So after researching online, actually through the American Academy of Family Practice, they have a journal called Family Practice Management, I saw this concept of group visit. And I thought it's a great way for me to leverage time by basically taking people who need the same education for various different issues and bringing them together, giving that education, but now spending, up to 90 minutes of time with them, educating them. They get tremendous value. So what I started doing is I said, I'll call all my patients with hypertension, bring them all there, do a group visit, and then in general, they might not need to come back for 3 months. And so then by that time, my clinical partner would have come back, and then I said, I'll do that with the diabetics and the people who have thyroid issues and people who have osteoporosis. And so soon I was able to see so many more patients in that time. And what happened afterwards is that the patients enjoyed the process so much that I've continued it ever since. It was really just a practice management deficit that I was trying to solve, but it soon became an exercise and experience for me of connection and better education for my patients.
So what do you see as sort of the core benefits from the patient's perspective? Because one of the things I like about this, there's a lot of innovation in medicine, or supposed innovation in medicine, that sort of seriously benefits one group without benefiting another. So maybe we could just go through and see from the patient's perspective what was their feedback and what changed for them.
So the first thing is they did not feel isolated. It's a very unique way to be able to gather with people who have similar educational needs. And not feeling alone is a big need for our patients. We tend to isolate them. We label them with diagnoses. They kind of go on the internet, potentially become even more scared about their diagnosis, and some degrees of hope are lost in the process. So these patients loved sharing stories, and you'd be surprised how much people want to share their solutions and their problems so that they can group think about it. Then the next thing is that because there was so much more time for the education piece, there was better health outcomes. We saw that patients who were afraid to ask questions would have answers given to them because there was somebody else in the audience who would potentially ask the question. And if not, it could be that they would be willing to ask the question but didn't even think of that question. So they were getting the benefit, this exponential benefit of the collective intelligence that was building with these patients. The other thing is that when you have 90 minutes with your physician, the person who you're entrusting to manage your care, you start creating connection. It's much more relaxed. The pace is different when you're able to spend the full 90 minutes to educate, really get connected through Q&A. You laugh together, you problem solve together. It definitely improved the relationship between myself and my patients.
That's amazing. So it's sort of a broadening and a depthening of the relation, or a deepening of the relationship with you. But it sounds like they're probably developing new relationships with other people in the group too.
Absolutely. And James, this is the thing that is very common in many traditions that use, healing in group. If you think about it, in those communities around the world that tend to have the highest number of centenarians, meaning healthy people living to the age of 100. Community is a big facet of health, just that social connection. So this absolutely helps that mind-body connection of feeling like you're a part of something bigger, a bigger group, or, spirituality, something even bigger than that. But it's completely in line with some of the logic that we're coming to understand about health as whole.
And what do you think is the specific value of the fact that not only are they all coming together as a group, but they all have the same basic sort of diagnosis? Is there extra value to that than just getting people together in a group?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like we said, that there's questions that get answered. They actually have the time to ask their questions, but then learn from the questions and answers of others. But what's interesting is that if I were to, for example, do some education on the anti-inflammatory food pyramid, there might be someone who was prescribed to come to that group visit because they have arthritis. Another person might be coming in because they have asthma. Another person might be coming in because they have diabetes. So you actually get a relatively broad number of diagnoses that you're managing in one group visit because the core education is the same. The beautiful thing that helps with behavior modification is they see, oh goodness, I also have arthritis. Even though I'm here for my diabetes, you're telling me that when I do this food pyramid, it's going to help that as well. And they start seeing that the root cause or the root solutions, I should say, which is based in nutrition and exercise and stress management, help a variety of diagnoses. Because to a certain extent, we've been cultured as a society here in the West to think of a one pill for one ill. We just think it's, oh, I have this problem, so I need a pill for that. And then I have another problem, so I need another pill for that. And so when they start seeing a varied number of diagnoses being managed through the same education, they're more bought into adopting that healthy behavior.
That's amazing. And given how many of these chronic diseases are all coming from the same genesis, this inflammation, the dietary causes, the stress, those kind of things. So do you find that you can get different diagnoses together and talk about these same root causes and everyone's getting value?
Absolutely. Because you see, when they come in to talk about it, we're not focusing on their disease. We're focusing on the cause. And so that's where a group visit, especially if it's a lifestyle-based group visit, has value. Because we all can agree that there's many different effects from poor nutrition. But the group visit's goal is to help teach you the valuable nutrition education to change that habit. I mean, it's lovely to talk about the problem, but at some point, once you know your problem, the goal is to focus in on the solution and not just know the solution, but understand how to implement it. And so that's where the key of the group visit is it's not just learning about how this pyramid works, but then taking it a step further and saying, now how are we going to make it work in your life? And this is where the group think starts to help, because you'll see people at different stages in a group visit. You'll have some people who are completely new to nutrition coming in, and then you'll have someone who's, let's say, a sophomore in nutrition versus a freshman. So when the sophomore is talking, the freshman hears some of the tips that the sophomore talks about and learns from that person. But the sophomore might learn from a freshman on something that might be just a cool chef trick that they had that they didn't know was a health habit. So that group think definitely is a major benefit of group visits.
Yeah, that's really exciting. In fact, it's funny that we have this conversation now because, a few years ago, we were actually, in my old business, we were working with a pediatric clinic, and they were looking at the same thing, and they saw that mothers who have kids with autism who are, going this direction to sort of work with them and treat them, the mothers who have had a kid with autism for 10 years have a massive knowledge base that they love to share with new autism mums as well. They feel good about it. The new autism mums get value from it. And it's just really this information delivery arbitrage that benefits everyone. So it sounds like, as people maybe do more, are more into the process, then they can help the other people within the group.
Absolutely, and they want to. And that's that social connection and social help piece of group visits. They absolutely want to help people. And what actually happens is that, you see, I can sit up in front of all the people and lecture about the benefits of the food pyramid, but there is something special about another patient talking about their journey and saying, "Oh yes, I remember when Dr. Saxena told me to be gluten-free, and I thought she was crazy, but then I did it, and my psoriasis became so much better, and now I'm off this medication." Patient number 2 hearing patient number 1's journey is more likely to potentially change with behavior other than just hearing me say, "Go gluten-free." And so I think hearing other people's journeys is absolutely a part of improving implementation of good lifestyle.
So in the practice, we're hearing different people's journey. One of the things that's been huge for me, my mother-in-law lost 100 pounds a couple of years ago. And really the only difference that happened is that she changed her diet. But the biggest thing was that she had like an accountability buddy who she'd have to call every day and say what she had eaten that day. And it wasn't really, it was just having to make that phone call every day. That was her only thing. That actually helped her to make those changes, because she's like, man, I'm going to have to tell this person I went to McDonald's or whatever it is. And so there was this added in accountability. Have you found ways to sort of help this peer communication outside of just the actual visit itself?
It's very interesting. We have what we lovingly call group visit groupies. And they love to come to these educational topics. They actually prefer them over the individual visits at times. And we have to kind of say, well, would you mind coming in for an individual visit? I'd like to talk to you about something. But what they do as well is they tend to kind of create groups. We have people who make friends within the group visit and then decide to get together outside. They share recipes. They stay after class. I mean, sometimes we have to, say, okay, office is closing. But this is wonderful that they want to continue to communicate with people who are like-minded. And that's the other thing. It brings up the point that there is a strong social influence of disease. If you look at the billboards, that you pass when you're driving, think about the food advertising of what they're pushing us to eat or how to behave. And so people who are looking for health guidance are so refreshed to be around others who are seeking the same thing. It's like you find your own little inner village of people who want to help support that, and you're not strange. And they absolutely connect outside and afterwards. And then in our practice, we also have community events where we do cooking demonstrations and book clubs. And so they gather there, and there's similarities. So we're creating like a health village in our practice.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I could see that potentially you could even tie in, other things with that group. So, I'm part of a CSA, community supported agriculture in New York. So I go to the local bar and pick up, a bunch of vegetables every Wednesday throughout the summer. Sort of like you could see that, that group mentality could sort of actually push into the rest of their lives through those sort of services too.
Absolutely. And actually, James, we've run an organic food co-op out of our office. And it's so nice because it's not inside the office, but outside in the parking lot. We have an ability to be able to put some of those folding tables out. The produce delivery comes. Then we have volunteers who are part of the co-op who basically, bag the produce, have it ready. And then families come and pick up the vegetables, and little children are, looking at the fruits and vegetables and trying to learn what this is. And, oh, this is kale and this is Swiss chard. And, it really, and many of the people who volunteer might be seniors who are retired. So it very much reminds you of these traditional villages in Asia, like in India where my family grew up, where the seniors are helping guide the wisdom of the younger families through what they know about food and, just social and movement and all that. So it's a lovely, again, group connection that's being created. Group doesn't always have to happen inside office walls. It's where you can make it happen and just make it connect from inside the office to outside into their lives.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's definitely the evolution of medicine. That's the future of medicine. I mean, there are a lot of people talking about this. I know I've obviously seen what Mark Hyman's been able to do with the Saddleback Church and that group, that community issues. And just as obesity can be seen to be contagious in a certain way, obviously getting healthy is contagious too, and people are in and part of it. It's really exciting.
Absolutely. We're seeing that. We're having patients of ours who are part of larger communities, whether they be church organizations or athletic organizations, and then they start as soon as they have a positive journey. So let's say someone decides to go gluten-free for reasons that we determine are good for them, and then all of a sudden they've lost their weight and some other condition drastically improves. They're automatically a health billboard for the community that they see. Sometimes it can be viewed as almost too strong of a proponent, but it absolutely is contagious, and people start seeing that person and wondering, what did he or she do? And let me ask. And then that's how the information starts pollinating, if you will.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I guess the last thing for the patient, before we get into the doctor, so from the doctor perspective, how does the value of a group visit, like financially, compare to the value of what they're already getting from like a regular visit to a doctor?
So if we're gonna assume the insurance-based model here, or actually you could kind of talk about a cash-based model, a patient would generally pay a copay. Right, so they come in, they check in, and for their individual appointment, they have a copay or a co-insurance that they have to pay. They submit that, and then they get seen by the doctor. In most practices who are 100% insurance-based, that visit may be 10, 15, 20 minutes. If you're taking cash, it might be 30, 40, 50 minutes even. But if you're taking cash, there's probably a steeper price than just what a copay might be. So this person might get an individual appointment for, let's just say on average, 30 minutes for that copay, and that's generous. Now, in the group visit, they come in and they still pay just the copay in the insurance-based model. And instead of getting a 30-minute visit, which is still quite generous, I keep saying, they get a 90-minute experience, a 90-minute educational experience for the same copay.
I mean, you're saying 30, but it's more likely like 7 or 10, right?
Yes, I'm being quite generous. That's why I keep saying that. So I was just trying to...
You don't need to undersell yourself, Shilpa. I mean, this is, that when I speak to physicians all the time who are really frustrated that they know that the cause of this issue is something that they're going to have to talk out with the patient, but there's no way they can do it in 7 to 10 minutes. And so, they're frustrated. The patient's not getting the right care. It seems like through this, the patient is able to have like a kind of a remarkable experience with their doctor, which is a key part to this, contagiousness as well.
Absolutely, and the doctor's intention is to be able to deliver the information, but the time factor is too strong to overcome in a typical medical practice. And so, you can become jaded and irritable and mean and reactive and just kind of offer Band-Aids, or you can decide to do it differently. And this is just one of those things that offers the potential for practices and patients to both benefit. It's a rare opportunity. And what's lovely is that Medicare is completely on board with this. So many different organizations are backing group visits because it solves access problem and it solves the time factor. And again, it gives practitioners the opportunity to give that extra time that they know, if delivered, can change outcomes and experience and connection. I mean, all those things we want as a practitioner.
That's amazing. So let's go into it from the doctor's point of view. So from the doctor's point of view, why is this a beneficial system for them?
So I generally break that down into 3 categories. There's the clinical, there's the financial, and then there's the operational. So in terms of clinical, I would tell you that it can become very disenchanting to know that if you had more time with the patient that you could have helped them. There's a certain reason why all of us go into the healthcare field, and it's not to work in a revolving door type of practice. And so if your clinical goal and intention is to help and serve patients, group visits helps solve that problem for you because you're absolutely going to have the extra time. Now, the next thing is that, sure, you want to give patients time, but you run a business. So what you need to do is leverage that time. So having that group come in and doing 13 to 16 small visits, if you will, in 90 minutes gives you the potential for 200 to 600% more revenue. That is a big factor for physicians because they're all looking for ways to help reduce the factory model experience for themselves. The patients don't like it, and physicians don't either. And then the next thing is there's a huge efficiency process by doing a group visit. The way that we've arranged our group visits, we have forms that the patient fills out. So it's the history, and the patient is driving all the question and answers that they're writing on this form. So think of all the office notes that are streamlined because you're asking the questions on a template, and then you just have to individualize that visit with a physical exam and maybe one or two individualized recommendations about their nutrition education. But you definitely drive down access issues. So if it took you, let's say, 180 days, if it took 180 days for a specialist to be seen, that could drop down to 80 days based on some analytics that have been done with group visits. Of course, if it takes 80 days to get in to see you, it will drop down, so your access improves. So those are the three categories, James. There's clinical, financial, and then operational.
And just on the fourth category there, what does it feel like for you delivering this group visit? Like when you're doing it and people are like starting to talk with each other and getting these communities, like to me it feels like maybe that's what doctors wanted when they first got into medicine, to have that sort of impact. What's the real feeling difference for you?
That's a great point. We all like to help patients for different reasons. It might be that we get very curious about the scientific process and really like being intellectual, but I would like to think, a majority of us who really get fulfillment out of serving patients and seeing their advancement towards health. And so it drives, whenever I do a group visit and I see patients experiencing their aha, the next day, if I have a more frustrating day, that group visit holds up my positive intentions for the next few days or even longer, because we need that in this service industry, that, we're motivated by something bigger, that fulfillment of really serving patients and seeing their happiness evolve.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and so from the doctor's point of view, it seems like it's a big win as well. I guess one potential benefit that I see for the doctor that maybe you haven't even spoke about, maybe this could be in a category in the future, is if you're a local television station looking to cover something interesting in medicine, a group visit system that also has a CSA out the front on Saturdays, the fact is you're putting it out the front, people are coming to the practice. All the best marketing stuff that I've ever seen for practices has always been about getting people into the space, coming back. It seems like, that the added benefit of innovating in this direction is that no one has really thought about doing this before. And if you're the first person that does it and you can, communicate with your local media, seems like something that they'd be interested in covering, because it's covering a lot of bases, solving medicine at like a sort of a macro level. The patients are getting a good experience. It's the classic like human interest story for local news, right?
Absolutely. And there's so many people who love to learn about this when they hear about it. We actually will incorporate cooking demonstrations into some of our group visits, and you can invite a local chef who might have an interest in healthy cooking, so it serves the community. You're basically getting the health community and the health network to expand. And, James, you might like this quote that I've heard, but that the kitchen is the pharmacy of the future. And if we're really going to move towards food as medicine as one of the main tenets of getting our population healthier, why not incorporate that into a group visit and incorporate your community into the educational process? So you're really expanding that message. And now it's creating more information, and then you market it. You're absolutely right. The television studios are looking for positive stories, and why not have it be a physician who's dedicated to really improving their patient's health?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, with all of these things, whether it be blogging or making videos or whatever, the side effect, like I've spoke with practitioners who have made videos for their patient. The side effect is that everyone else sees those videos and it sort of doubles as marketing. I think any innovation in this way is really valuable for that. So I would encourage doctors to think, if they're thinking about a new practice model, one of the things that tends to be intimidating is, how am I going to get these new patients who are going to pay cash or otherwise? But it seems like a combination of the marketing benefit that comes from doing something innovative and the fact that, let's just face it, like basically you're allowing someone who, if they didn't have the money before, would never have access to a functional medicine doctor because, most of them it's expensive or otherwise. Here's a situation where it's available to everyone, right?
Yes, if you have a cash-based practice, the cost to have a group visit attendee would likely be much lower than it would be to have them see you individually, so they can still get some of that core education through group visit access to your practice.
That's great. So how do you individualize it for the patients? Do you have patients come in between group visits for a individualized checkup, or is there time in the 90 minutes to speak with each person individually? Do you do it all yourself? You just sort of on a practical level, how does that work? Do you have a nurse there? Do you have a health coach?
There's many different ways to do group visits, but if I were to whittle it down, there would be the 2-member approach and a 1-member approach. So if you're going to be billing insurance, one of the members has to be a billable provider. So whether it's an MD, a DO, a nurse practitioner, a PA. So one person has to be a billable provider. So the other person, I highly recommend a 2-member scenario. So one member in that team, of the group visit team, is the educator. They sit in front of the audience and do a majority of the education. So, if it's you, that's great. If you have a dietitian that works with you or a local dietitian who wants to come in and help about the subject matter, anybody could be the educator on the subject matter, somebody in-house or outside. So this, again, brings community together. Now, the billable provider sits in a semi-private location. So if you can imagine like a semicircle of patients facing the lecturer or the educator. Now, behind the semicircle, there is a little semi-private interaction going on with the billable provider and one of the patients in the group. So what happens is that each patient is individually tapped on the shoulder and they go to that semi-private location. That semi-private location is where the billable provider does a targeted physical exam, fills in the visit form appropriately, reviews it, and of course the visit form and the way it's laid out is very essential to this thing running smooth. And then it must be noted that group visits are not where you're taking care of acute emergencies. This is where you're taking care of people with chronic issues who need core education. And so there is, for example, in our visit forms, some preset recommendations. And then the provider, the billable provider, would just go ahead and mark off these particular ones are what I would like to, quote unquote, order for my patients or recommend for my patients. There's also a section in our visit form that allows the patient to request more information. So, for instance, if we were to talk about advanced lipoprotein testing for cholesterol, and that's what the group visit was about, that, your standard cholesterol panel might not be enough to identify your risk. One of the things on our template at the bottom is, I would like more information about advanced lipoprotein testing, or schedule lipoprotein testing for me. And if they mark that off, once the group visit is over and that billable encounter, that 5 to 7 minute billable encounter is over, the patient would join back into the group and the next person would be tapped and so on and so forth. And at the end, all those forms are submitted to an administrative person, the checkout person, if you will, who will compile them and then either that day or the next day go through all the pre-checked lists from the patient and the provider and just follow through. So they would call the patient who said, I'd like to set up this lab draw. And of course, the provider says that's okay. And so then they schedule it. And then after they get that lab visit done, maybe the individual visit is what follows to review those labs. So it just basically allows a huge opportunity for doctors to give the education and then have the patient initiate care, and then doctor signs off. But the care is very limited to what the education piece is about. So let me just take it one step further. If there's a group visit on, let's talk about, this cholesterol testing, for example. If someone has knee pain that they want to talk about during that visit, they're very, respectfully reminded that this visit is not about the knee pain, it's about the cholesterol education. And then as they check out, they can write down, we would guide them to say, you'd like an individual appointment to look into your knee pain, and then they would come back for that. So that way it simplifies what the goals and objectives are for that group visit.
That's great. So that comes to, I guess, the big question is, what are, in your experience thus far, what are the best topics for group visits? Like if you're a physician now and you like the sound of this and you'd like to sort of dip your toe in the water and try doing a group visit a week or a group visit a month or even a group visit a day, what would be the number one things that you would recommend for, say, like a family physician or internist or, or sort of primary care?
So I'm going to speak from the integrative functional medicine lens because that's who I am as a family physician who practices that. And what I would first say is that many of us may have a specialty within our practice. So if we are known for being able to help people with hormone issues, well, then you would maybe not just have one general group visit about hormones. You might say, this is a group visit on women who want to learn about breast cancer prevention. And then this is a group visit on dealing with menstrual migraines. If you had enough people who in your practice would be able to come and fill a group visit, depending on how subspecialized you are. But now let's just say you are, the standard, if you will, amazing, functional, integrative primary care physician, and you see the whole gamut. So then what I might do is create categories based on educational things that you know. So we tend to group them into cardiovascular, so people who might have hypertension, hyperlipidemia, blood sugar issues, history of heart disease, they might come to something about that lipoprotein testing. Another category, which is easy to drive many patients to who want to learn about core education, is things related to gut health. So that's a big part of integrative and functional medicine. So, you might attract people who have, the standard irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel disease, but it might be people who have mental health issues that you suspect there's a gut-brain connection, or maybe it could be somebody who has food allergies that you recommend to go to that visit. So gut health is another common topic that attracts many people. Hormones is another great general topic. Now, hormones can be divided. You might have many people who have thyroid issues, so you could do a group visit just on hypothyroidism, or you could have that many people who have autoimmune thyroid disease that you would just invite everybody with autoimmune thyroid, or you could do a group visit on autoimmunity. The next kind of big bundle of people that I see are the people who have blood sugar and insulin issues, and that causes a variety of issues, diseases. So I might attract people who have the classic, insulin resistance or diabetes, but I could also invite people with PCOS, people who have fatty liver disease, many different diagnoses that come down to their need to learn about blood sugar and blood insulin regulation. And so we talked about those four. I would say that's kind of a core group of topics. And then, weight management could be another one that is now identified as a disease. Obesity is finally called a disease so that we can start doing more work with it. And again, you just need to look. If I was a neurologist and I saw hundreds of patients with seizures, I might do a group visit on maintaining healthy or non-pharmaceutical approaches to seizures. And this is where I give my standard education. So it helps to know who you see, because you want to fill the group visit with people. It makes no sense to do a group visit and only 2 people come.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I could see actually limitless opportunities for this in specialists as well, because I've actually had the pleasure this year to meet a couple of doctor husband and wife teams where the husband, in one case, the husband was a dermatologist and the wife was functional medicine doctor. Or actually, I just met the other day, psychiatrist, child psychiatrist husband and functional integrated medicine wife. And it's really interesting because they already had a situation where the specialist, like with the skincare dermatology, tough case that's not clearing up with his regular dermatology practice, he sends her over to the functional medicine because then they look at gluten and all of the internal measures to work with that. But could you see, like in a dermatology practice, rather than just referring them over, you could just say, hey, in this dermatology practice for these, I'm going to recommend that because of your condition you should come to our monthly or our weekly group visit on food and skin conditions that's going to be run here. And that way, it's not like an all extra $200-300 visit to do that. It's a cheap visit, and they're going to get the benefit because you don't really need a full hour-long visit with a functional medicine person to tell you to stop eating gluten so that your skin stuff will clear up. And I could see it in psychiatry. I mean, when you look at the cytokine theory of psychiatry now with inflammation, it's all the same kind of stuff. So where all of these specialties have these same causes as the main issue, just makes complete sense to me to just add in a group visit that talks at underlying cause, whatever your specialty is.
That's right. What you have to make sure in all of this, because all your ideas are great, James, is that if you're going to bill insurance, you have to make sure that the visit is medically necessary. So let's say in your example, if there's a dermatologist who's having a hard time figuring out a cause and refers to the functional medicine spouse to talk about gluten-free, well, then it would be important in that visit form to write down, psoriasis as the diagnosis. That's what makes it medically necessary for you to bill insurance and get reimbursed. So, and then what I would say is, let's say that you are going to do a 3-week series on how to become gluten-free, because you're first going to talk about the disease approach in the first group visit, how gluten causes issues, and then the next time you're going to talk about, reading food labels and understanding how to become gluten-free, and then the third one is let's problem solve on your attempts to have gone gluten-free, or let's also talk about who's better with their issues. So you can create a series, but always making sure that there's a medically necessary reason for them to come to the group visit if you're billing insurance. Now, there will be people, as I mentioned, the group visit groupies, who want to come to learn, but they don't even have a problem in that arena. So you could run into problems if, let's say, for instance, I'm doing a group visit on acid reflux. If the person doesn't have acid reflux or any digestive issues, but let's say their husband does and they're not a member of the practice, they cannot come and bill their insurance because it's not medically necessary for them to learn that information about acid reflux. So that's just a little caveat to be mindful of. But I say that only because so many doctors are so cautious about insurance, and I don't want them to not do group visits because of it. There's a great way to be very in line with what insurance wants so that patients are happy that you're billing their insurance. They want you to get the value. They want to get the value out of the astronomical fee they might be paying every month, but you just want to be in compliance so that nobody gets burned in the process.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for the reminder on that, because you are, speaking to that doctor group who, probably haven't come across this, in this journey, but I think it's really valuable. It seems to me also, Shilpa, with this is that a lot more people are now on basically healthcare plans where they're pretty much paying cash for stuff anyway because of their deductible. They got a high deductible plan. And so it seems like, it's moving in this direction where people are going to be, have more choice over what they take. And so, even with people who have those plans, maybe paying $25 or $30 in cash for a 90-minute visit is not out of the realm of possibility for a lot of people too, especially if they're getting that much value from it, the accountability, the community. It seems like there might be an opportunity for that too. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think that you can relay so much more information in a 90-minute educational visit than you can in a 7, 10, 15-minute encounter. So you get benefits that they only have to pay 1 visit's worth of money and get potentially 3 visits worth of value.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so for physicians who are listening to this now, who are just thinking like, I really don't have the skills maybe to be able to pull this off, what are the extra skills that you need in order to facilitate, like, who maybe doctors have never facilitated a group of 16 people in a room together? I mean, there are certain skills to do with giving everyone a potential to talk and getting the best dynamic. What are new skills that have to be learned to pull this off? Are there any?
Well, you have to be open-minded enough to kind of figure out a new operational scheme in your practice. I mean, it's not that complex. You just have to be open-minded enough to figure it out. I mean, many of us are problem solvers. That's what we've been trained to do. We just have to apply it to an operational diagnosis, if you will. And so, there's a role for someone that might be called the group visit champion in your office that helps you work through the operational aspects. It might be your office manager or somebody else in your office who really takes a liking to this. And what they do is help support you in terms of getting the patients and figuring out how the flow would be in your office. So again, it's achievable. You just have to take that initiative to do it. It's not even difficult. It's just you need the initiative. Take the first step and start thinking, how would I logistically do this? Oh, I'll have to do the group visit in the last 2 hours of my day because I can't have people in my lobby who are seeing a doctor, walking through to see the doctor at the same time I'm trying to do my group visit experience, those kinds of things. Then the next thing, which you would think would be a obstacle, which is if you think you're not a good lecturer, it's amazing how much doctors actually are wonderful with connecting in a group dynamic, especially with patients that they already know. They've shown that it's very few doctor personality types that cannot do a group visit successfully. In actuality, when a doctor has time to be themselves, they actually naturally become the health care educator. It's in them. There are some, potentially very, very, very shy doctors who can't make it past their shyness to do the group visit, but these doctors are few and far between. I think that just gets pushed out of you during medical school and residency. You have to be somewhat gregarious to do it. But most personalities expand in the group visit space. They don't kind of involute, if you will. So these skills they're kind of a little bit of a logistical brain, which you can figure out and then just be yourself.
That's amazing. Well, any strategy that ends with the words "just be yourself," I think, is definitely part of this evolution of medicine. Because if we've been pretending to be other people along, you can see why maybe it hasn't been working for us. That's interesting. So, how about the legal aspects? Because I've heard from different practitioners, they get very concerned about it, or they don't know whether they can do it legally, maybe because they're just scared, they never heard of it. From your perspective, you've been teaching physicians to do it. You've obviously been doing it in your practice in Florida. Are there any sort of legal thoughts or aspects that need to be thought of ahead of time before moving forward with something like this in the practice?
There's a couple of things that I would say. The first thing that most people think about is the HIPAA violation potential. And in the 20 to 30 years that group visits have been done, and they are done at very prestigious hospitals and practices, including some VA centers, Harvard Vanguard, Yale. Many of these institutions have implemented group visits. And, I just say as a logical person, if they're doing it, then it means that it can't be that illegal, because those are huge institutions with very smart lawyers figuring out, how to do that in compliance. And so the HIPAA laws don't specifically call out what to do for a patient in group visits. So you comply with the general HIPAA. What's the essence of what a HIPAA purpose is? And that would be, in the way that we do our group visits, is to put a clause at the top of our visit form that basically asks and reminds patients to not disclose information about others outside the group visit. And in the history of group visits, there's never been a legal case, nor has there been problems with patients respecting that, because I think everybody becomes more human in a group visit. So there, again, as long as you have that HIPAA clause, have the patient sign off, and if there's a caregiver, have them initial it and then scan it into the permanent record. That generally works well. If you wanted to take it a step further because you are in a larger institution that might have a little bit more, requirements that have to be met, you can talk to the medical risk department to see if there's any other language that should be on your visit form. Then the next thing besides HIPAA would be the insurance billing that you want to be in compliance with. And so, one of the things that you could do is write a letter to all of your insurers, basically saying, I'm going to be instituting group visits. This is the way that I will be billing, and is this okay? And you can get much guidance from the Centers for the CMS, Medicare folks, and the American Academy of Family Practice on how to pursue that. Again, by just looking at the ways they're recommending for all of us primary care physicians to talk to our insurance companies. Basically, the legal thing to know is that the group education is not the billable portion of the visit. The billable portion is actually that little 5-minute semi-private scenario that I talked about. That is where the face-to-face interaction is happening, and you're not billing for the time that you're there. You're billing based on the complexity of your encounter at that point. And so the complexity, if you craft a very nice visit note that is driven by the patient answers, can be easily a 99213 and sometimes even a 99214. But this is where you would probably want to converse with your billing and coding people in your office or whoever you contract with to be able to make sure that you're in compliance with what insurance wants you to do in terms of how you document the group visit. But the legal kicker is do not bill for the group education. It is the face-to-face time, which is what you'd be doing. I have a slide in one of my presentations that always kind of sets the point in. As a family physician, I see kids, I take care of families. So if I, for example, have a family of 4 who comes to see me because they all contracted a cold, well, we don't put the 4 individuals in 4 separate rooms. We put mom, dad, and the 2 kids all in one room. It might be crowded, but they're all in one room. And then what I do is I face the mother and I have the discussion with her. So there's my face-to-face encounter, and then I bill insurance for that one visit. Then I switch my focus to the dad, and then I do my visit there, bill insurance. Then I face a child, and then I face the other child. Even though they're all in the same room, I'm doing 4 individual visits. They're just, everybody else is observing while I'm doing it. The family members are supportive and they're observing. But there's actually no prohibition for you taking care of people in a face-to-face format in a group setting where it's supportive, as long as it's medically necessary, which, in my example is. So it's no different than what we're doing with groups of people in a room. It's just being expanded by the order of 10 to 16 people in a room.
So, yeah, what's the magic number for you for these group visits, Shilpa?
Hey, I say 10 to 16. If you get too few people, the group dynamic is lost, the group think is lost, the sharing might be lost, although it's okay in the beginning to have a smaller group because the word is getting out. Your goal when you're hitting cruise control is to get around 10 people on the low end. And then if 16 might be the top of what you might consider, but, you can feel out the numbers that I'm talking about. Because if you start getting too large, it starts feeling like a lecture. You're not getting that personal face-to-face contact. You might not be able to do that many semi-private individual visits in the back in 90 minutes if you start getting up towards 20 and 25. So we want to avoid the lecture feeling like you're being talked to. You want to create conversation within during a group visit.
Yeah, and 90 minutes, what does the structure look like in those 90 minutes?
So the 90 minutes, I generally will do a lecture education, meaning I'm a visual learner, so all of mine have PowerPoints and pictures, and so I'll do that education for 30 minutes. During that time, if I have a larger group, the nurse practitioner I work with will tap people during that time during the lecture. But remember, they're still able to listen to the lecture while I'm talking. She's just examining them quietly and filling out their forms. Now, after the 30-minute lecture, there is a 60-minute Q&A. This is when the true aspect of the group think and the group share and the group education occurs. During this time, again, the nurse practitioner or the other physician, whoever is the billable provider, is still doing the tap out and doing her individual visits. So that's the full 90 minutes. What we ask our patients to do is they can come anytime in the half hour before the group visit starts to get their vitals drawn, if there's any other things they needed to schedule, to do that all before the education starts. And our group visit champion is kind of like Julie, the cruise director, who just kind of makes sure everybody's happy. And, we'll have bottled waters out. So we create an experience. We might sometimes, based on the topic, get a fruit and veggie platter for people to munch on based on the hour. So those 30 minutes prior to the group visit is more staff time. So in terms of the provider time, it's 90 minutes of your time. So if you think about, if I can just kind of play out the mathematics of this, if I was a provider and seeing patients individually in 90 minutes, I might be able to, if I did 15-minute appointments, see 4 times, which is very difficult, in my opinion, in functional and integrative medicine. You would be able to see 4 an hour for 3 hours, so you might be able to see 12. But let's be serious. You're not going to get much education done in 15 minutes. You're just running from room to room. You're not really giving great foundational education that's going to change behavior, which is really the core of what we need to accomplish here. And so you might be able to see 12. Instead, you're going to be able to bill for 16 during that 90 minutes, and all of them are going to love you for what you've just given them. 90 minutes of pure education.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, that's doctor as teacher, just in a sort of a more effective way, it seems like, because we sort of lost that, haven't we?
Absolutely, and that's the derivation of the word doctor, is the comedic part of it, is that we're meant to be educators.
It's amazing. So look, there's 5 minutes left. I think you've really done a great job of explaining why this is valuable, why you think this is the future. And I really would encourage any physician that's listening or any patient to go and ask their physician, ask your doctor if group visits might be right for them. That's what I would say. But let me ask you this on this perspective, Shilpa, because I know that this is not the only area that you're innovating. I know that you've written books about cooking. I've heard you lecture on, reframing medicine as an experience rather than just sort of a service-driven thing. This summit is called the Evolution of Medicine. When you take a step back, obviously it's very clear to me how this group visit is an evolution of medicine, because as we evolve to take on these different types of diseases that don't have a single cause and require the patient to be active and a part of the process, this obviously is a part of that. But it seems like you're on the same thinking of this evolution of medicine as well. Where are some other areas where you're passionate about seeing medicine evolve, and what do you see as the evolution of medicine?
The evolution of medicine is a broad but necessary term. It implies that it needs to continue to evolve, because obviously if we look at the way our society is, we haven't mastered medicine in our country. And so what we're all realizing is that the information age has bridged the gap between what doctors know and what patients are now easily able to learn on their own. And this well-informed consumer of healthcare is now looking for someone to partner with. So any innovation has to take into account that we have a new patient that we're taking care of, a patient who understands to some extent what could be going on with the body. And so the old days of paternalism, where the doctor would just kind of, quote unquote, order what they need to have done and the patient would just obediently say yes and do it, is no longer present. We have patients who are informed, who actually know what could be the root cause of their issues. They are motivated to learn, and they want to be a part of their healthcare experience. So think of innovative ways, whether it be group visits. We have community education. We have a teaching kitchen in our office. We have a fitness center. Redefine what healthcare should be and make it parallel to what you believe you went into medicine for in the beginning. And if you need to be an educator by writing a book about what you've learned, sharing recipes, getting on the local media stations and reminding patients, not even reminding, really re-educating them to the power that they have to help themselves, these are ways that we're going to start shifting this evolutionary process towards a better way of taking care of our patients. We just have to get the message out and get the patients empowered and better. What's interesting, James, is that many of my patients have seen subspecialists for years and haven't found the answer in terms of reversing their disease or mitigating their disease. And what I always remind them is that whenever we teach you something and you get better, I need you to go back to your subspecialist, even if you don't need his services anymore. Go back and say what you did so that subspecialist knows Well, the next time they see someone with rheumatoid arthritis, they might consider evaluating a gluten-free diet, for example. It's our obligation as healthcare providers to be open-minded to this new information, and patients are going to have to drive this by the same kind of passion they have to get this in the medical setting.
I'm so glad you said that, because it really ties together what we're doing with the summit. I mean, obviously, one of the cool things is that there's going to be patients who are listening to this too, because I'm sure they're excited about it. So patients, if you're listening, go out and ask your doctor if this is a right fit. And I think that's great fit. And, you know, a couple of the other topics that we've had in the summit, one is empowerment is the new compliance. We were talking really about strategies for doctors to move to more of an empowerment type of relationship with their patients, which is new and potentially foreign. And also, it was interesting what you mentioned about the family there, because another one of the practitioners, doctors, is talking about the family as a unit for sustainable change. It's hard to be the weird kid in the family that can't eat gluten if everyone else is having gluten every day, but you can see how we can really make change as moving forward as a family. So you've mentioned all of those things, which is tying it in really nicely. Dr. Saxena, thank you so much for being on this. I know, it's obviously it's a fine line between advertising stuff or otherwise. I just feel like what you've provided today is really valuable, but I know that you have tools to make it easy for people to actually go through the process of developing. If a doctor's interested in doing this, but they don't really know where to start, you have some resources that can help them.
Yes, we are very much, as an office, dedicated to making this easier for other practices. There is no reason to have people go through the same, initial steps that we did. So we've created a website which is called www.groupvisittoolkit.com, and I've created some kind of core group visits with their visit forms, with patient education handouts, with flyers on how to do group visits. There's an implementation specialist who can help you through the process. The PowerPoints are there in case you wanted me to do the education. I'm there on video. If you want to do it yourself, the PowerPoint is available. All these things to be able to get you to have this experience, and then you take over. You create more group visits if you need to, but get the message out, get the patients better, and it'll take care of itself.
That's awesome. And you also, I know you have a book for cooking with Indian recipes for health as well. I'm still waiting for that Mexican one, the second one, and I'm definitely here to provide any sort of taste testing or anything that you need for your second book.
I'll jot that down here, James. But yes, thank you. We have a wonderful cookbook. It's called The Ingredients Matter India. So on our website, theingredientsmatter.com, you can learn a lot more about it. And basically, it's, again, an opportunity to share some delicious plant-based recipes that we've created in order to help people who are gluten-free and have issues with allergies. They're anti-inflammatory. It's a whole foods-based cookbook, and it uses that ancient healing wisdom of strategic spices to be able to get, great vegetable dishes into you, and you enjoy, and they're healing you at the same time.
Well, I know that this is just the beginning of your innovation in medicine. I'm really proud to know you and to get to work with you, and I'm excited of the work that we're going to do together in the future. I have a feeling that we're both really just getting started on changing medicine. I think today has been an amazing communication, an amazing offering to the medical community, to patients, even to health stakeholders. I'm hoping that listening today are people that are holding on the strings of bigger things in medicine and can see just how valuable this is in building out care. I really appreciate you being here and doing this with me today, and I hope that the ripple effect of this call will be significant. And I really just appreciate you and honor your role in the evolution of medicine. So thank you so much for being with me here today.
Oh, thank you so much, James. And you continue to be an inspiration to many of us, helping the message get out. Thank you for your work.
No problem. Thanks, Shilpa. We'll see you soon. Dr. Shilpa Saxena. You've seen her website there. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.